Originally, this video was going to be an early critique of the Rite of the Nine event where I went over some criticisms I had surrounding it that mainly came from the community discovering that the original release schedule for the dungeons themselves was going to be one dungeon every 3 weeks. And naturally, people were not very happy about this, self included, and as soon as the news hit, the community went into a full frenzy on Twitter and Reddit, making their voices heard and ultimately trying to get through to Bungie about how this was a terrible idea. Initially, Bungie actually doubled down on their planned schedule, but as a result were again met with waves of complaints, and shortly after they finally decided to give in and amend the schedule to now one dungeon every 2 weeks, starting with Ghosts of the Deep on Tuesday the 20th of July, or tomorrow if you're watching this video on Monday. So given that the release schedule has now been changed to a more appeasing outcome, I didn't see much point in releasing the initial rendition of this video. However, the second and arguably more important critique I was going to cover was the status of the loot from the event itself, more specifically the 12 reprised dungeon weapons, because if you know anything about the perks on these guns, and more generally the guns themselves, there's definitely a lot left to be desired in that respect. I'm gonna keep it real with you, the guns from this event are, for the most part, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, pretty mid, which is disappointing given that events like Rite of the Nine and the iconic Into the Light update are supposed to give players a fun event filled with desirable loot they can then take into the next year of content. So today I'm going to take you through my versions of the 12 new dungeon weapons and how I would personally restructure their perk pools to make them more desirable, while also providing useful feedback that I hope Bungie might see and take into account when designing future weapon sets just like these. So, like I mentioned in the intro, a lot of people had high expectations because much like the Brave Arsenal from Into the Light, Rite of the Nine features 12 reprise weapons with refreshed perk pools and double perk shiny variants with a unique visual treatment. And taking a look back at the Brave Arsenal, there were certainly some bangers. To name a few, the Mountaintop returned after 6 years collecting dust with a new movement boosting frame and random rolled perk combos like autoloading recombination, which after Heritage from Deepstone Crypt is still the only other weapon ever to receive this coveted perk combo. And the new movement options granted by the frame, letting you easily scale vertical heights, is still an iconic and insanely useful addition used by many to this day. Other iconic primary weapons like Midnight Coup and the Recluse returned with super solid combos like Explosive Payload Frenzy or Repulsor Brace Surrounded. And of course we can't forget about Edge Transit and how it quickly began to dominate the DPS meta with its god roll of Envious Assassin bait and switch. And if you were one of the lucky few to have Cascade points selectable, the DPS you could output was truly something special, at least for that time. RIP Envious Assassin. So when it came to the Rite of the Nine weapon set, expectations were set pretty damn high. So did they deliver? Well, kind of, but not really. Before we get into the bad, we ought to start with the good. So first, let me explain what I mean by good in this case. The way I see weapon sets like the Brave Arsenal, the Elegant Arsenal, which by the way is the official name of the Rite of the Nine weapons, and all future weapon sets that are similar, is that they're supposed to offer strong perk combos that compete with the current best options in their respective slot. Or they provide something unique that the competing weapon doesn't have that isn't necessarily stronger but still offers something new and sets it apart. The best example I can give is Edge Transit, where it became the second grenade launcher ever to get the combo of Envious Assassin bait and switch. The only other one at the time was the Cataphract GL3 from Trials of Osiris. So number one, this was awesome because you didn't need to play Trials to get a highly sought after perk combo, but number two, Edge Transit was also the first ever grenade launcher to get Cascade points in the left column, something very unusual that has only appeared one other time on the VS Chill Inhibitor from Vesper's Host. This gave it something unique over Cataphract, and thus in my eyes makes it a perfect candidate for the type of weapons to expect from these events. So taking a look at the Elegant Arsenal, which weapons fulfill this criteria? Well, in my opinion, there is actually only one weapon that Bungie got spot on and a couple others with good perks but still had some leftover potential. And the weapon I think they got just right is actually a Sudden Death from the Prophecy weapon set. A Sudden Death is a void aggressive frame shotgun which has been reprised once before, but this time they decided to give it the combo of 1-2 punch and trench barrel, making it the first ever shotgun to receive this curated combo. And for any builds that can feature a 1-2 punch shotgun like Arc or Prismatic Hunter, Strand Titan or Solar Warlock, this shotgun will be excellent for them since now you're also going to be maximizing the damage of the shotgun itself with Trench Barrel, which by the way is a 50% damage buff. So this roll definitely gets a point for the uniqueness of it. Besides that though, it also gets redirection in the right column, which particularly on shotguns is a really strong perk as seen with Unvoiced from Sundered Doctrine, and it also gets Discord in the left column to pair with it for better ammo economy. So in my opinion, the absolute mega god roll for this thing would be 1-2 punch and Discord on the left, and redirection Trench Barrel on the right. As far as the other decent weapons go, Wilderflight is pretty good with it being the second energy grenade launcher to get Envious Arsenal, making way for some pretty cool weapon rotations, but in my opinion they could have been a little more adventurous in the right column and given it elemental honing over bait and switch, since these days bait and switch is starting to show its age, and I'm looking forward to a world where it's phased out in favor of more interesting perks like elemental honing, for example. Cold Comfort is also the third rocket after Cynosia and Hezen Vengeance to get the combo of Envious Arsenal elemental honing, which I am glad they added, since stasis damage is typically rather annoying to apply, so having it as the element of the rocket itself is a good bonus that sets it apart from Cynosia and Hezen, but unfortunately that's where the innovation stops. In the left column there's no overflow, no autoloading, and instead there's just some dumb additions like Rime Stealer. Like, is anyone seriously destroying stasis crystals with a rocket launcher to gain frost armor? Something which can be done far more easily by collecting an orb, for example. There's also Reconstruction, which is just a really bad perk now, and the same can be said for the right column as well. In my opinion, they should have added autoloading and overflow to the left, and to spice things up, make it the first rocket to have redirection in the right column. Because think about it, redirection requires kills against red bars to generate stacks, and when consumed, the damage buff is equal to 100%. So in simple terms, you get double damage rockets. And you might be thinking that sounds way too OP, but I really don't think it is. You see, you first have to get kills with the rocket itself, 15 to be precise if you want maximum stacks, which wastes ammo, and the trade-off is that you get rewarded with double damage rockets for your remaining ammo. But further to that, this season we have the Perpetual Destruction artifact perk, which refunds rocket ammo on multi-kills, making this theoretical combo very strong for this season only, which ties back into what I said about how these weapons are supposed to be a fun and at times overpowered send-off to the year of content that came before, because after Perpetual Destruction is gone, ain't nobody using this. But it would make this 2-month waiting period until the next DLC just that much more exciting, and in my opinion it was a huge miss to just give it the standard rocket perks, and that isn't even considering how it has to compete with the literal nuclear bomb that is the Vault of Glass origin trait on Hezen Vengeance, where casting your super doubles your magazine size for 23 seconds. And if you have the Legend Incarnate artifact perk, then you also get a free 10% damage boost while the origin trait is active. And the funniest part, Hezen Vengeance is also completely free to play earnable, just like Cold Comfort. Restoration Ritual during its time was a very strong origin trait, but times have changed and is genuinely nothing compared to Time Lost Magazine. That said though, Cold Comfort is still pretty decent. Relentless from the Prophecy loot pool is also okay, with it being the second ever strand weapon to receive Firefly, so it gets points for that. But this also confuses me even more about this weapon set, because why give Relentless Firefly when Prosecutor, also from Prophecy, gets Dragonfly instead? Why not Firefly for both? I don't know man, just Bungie being Bungie. Personally, I don't actually know what I would change about Relentless, since it's definitely just fine as it is, so maybe let me know in the comments what you would have wished to see on this weapon. But also, this applies to all of the weapons we talk about today as well, so get creative and get active in the comments. So now let's get on to the bad and the okay at best, starting with Long Arm, which is quite possibly the least desirable scout rifle, with it being an aggressive frame that also comes with some really uninteresting perks. There's no sign of either jolting feedback or vault shot, and even though Rolling Storm is there, it's really not the same. And the left column is just filled with mid, so what I would do is give it the combo of Firefly Vault Shot to give it some genuine desirability. Aggressive frame scout rifles can have their niche due to their unique reload animation, where they quickly rechamber 2 rounds at a time that also counts as a true reload, meaning it will trigger on reload perks, with the best example I can give being Time Worn Wayfarer from Episode Echoes, where it's able to really quickly and easily trigger heal clip after each and every kill. So in a similar vein, I'd imagine giving Vault Shot to one would also work in this way. So it's a shame that Bungie didn't go for this. Judgment is a 140 RPM stasis hand cannon, which already lets it down since stasis elemental crowd control perks are just so much weaker than the likes of Destabilizing Rounds, Vault Shot, or Incandescent, and despite it having Rime Stealer Headstone, it still isn't enough to move the needle. I don't think there's much saving this weapon, but I would give it the combo of Frenzy Headstone instead to spice things up a little. It's unfortunate that in their current state, Stasis and Strand primary weapons cannot compete with their light element counterparts purely due to the strength of their respective CC perks. So I would hope that in future they create new perks specifically for darkness weapons, like for example Rime Rounds, where scoring a kill makes consecutive kills spread slow to nearby enemies, or for Strand you could have Needle Rounds. Scoring a kill causes your weapon fire to occasionally embed strand needles into your target that deal damage and unravel into a threadling after the initial detonation, kinda like how the Warlock Needlestorm super works. Prosecutor is actually somewhat okay with it getting combos like Dragonfly Vault Shot or Subsistence Rampage, but why not go the extra mile and give it the old breakneck roll of Rampage Onslaught? Or since it's an arc auto rifle, why not go a little more crazy with Jolting Feedback Vault Shot together? Definitely not the most extreme perk combo, but certainly something unique. Personally, I see the combo of Rampage Onslaught as something more realistic we might actually see in future, and it always puzzled me why they never reintroduced this combo alongside Breakneck's Reprisal. But this may have been due to it being a playlist weapon, which are generally dumbed down and don't often have the greatest perk combos to begin with, but surely that excuses a weapon from an endgame event like Rite of the Nine from this reasoning, no? Well, I wish that were true. In any case, at least Prosecutor isn't the worst offender, unlike this next weapon. Greasy Luck is just a glaive. What more can I really say? Glaives are super niche weapons to use, and while granted they are strong in their respective niche, there isn't too much you can do to elevate it above other glaives, especially since Rake Angle exists, and I don't think anything is power creeping it anytime soon, given how potent Chill Clip is on a glaive. Objectively speaking, Greasy Luck was always going to have a hard time competing with forthcoming Deviants, because being a void glaive with destabilizing rounds already puts it in a tier above the likes of Incandescent, for whatever that's worth. But in general, think about all the other strong Adclair weapons in the energy slot like Rocket Sidearms, Velocity Baton, Sunshot, Graviton Lance, the list goes on. This thing was basically dead on arrival. Also from Ghosts of the Deep, we have new Pacific Epitaph, and right off the bat we can see that it's a waveframe grenade launcher, which used to be the kings of Adclair back in the Lightfall era of the game, but ever since their nerf in the final shape and the introduction of Rocket Sidearms, waveframes have sadly taken a backseat in the meta. However, the one thing which might have convinced people to try this weapon was the possibility of it receiving Chill Clip, given that it's a stasis weapon, but again, no dice. It is technically the second kinetic salt waveframe to receive chain reaction after Tusk of the Boar, but since the nerf, this isn't really as much of a wow factor anymore. It doesn't even have Ambitious Assassin in the left column to match the iconic Forbearance role, so my version would almost certainly give it the combo of Ambitious Assassin chain reaction, but also Ambitious Assassin Chill Clip, or really start cranking it by doing chain reaction plus Chill Clip. Now that would be something fun to run for sure. No Survivors is also pretty okay, with it being the first SMG to get Heal Clip Incandescent, but an improvement would be to give it Frenzy Incandescent. This would really set it apart in my opinion. Then we have Terminus Horizon, which is an arc high impact machine gun, aka the slowest firing ones, and I do believe that this is the weapon's biggest hindrance. The perks are actually pretty good and standard for most machine guns. The only thing to change here would be the frame itself, so why not go the other end of the spectrum and make it a 900 RPM rapid fire frame instead, exactly like Retrofit Escapade. You guys remember when this thing was meta? Finally, there's the Liminal Vigil Stasis Sidearm from Spire of the Watcher, and it faces the same problems that Judgment does. It's just so overshadowed by the light elemental perks that it really isn't worth using, especially when weapons like Tenacious Mastery exist competing for the same slot. Overall though, it isn't just the perk pools that let a good amount of these weapons down, it's also just down to the fact that the archetypes themselves aren't terribly popular, and in my opinion, swapping Spire of the Watcher for Warlord's Ruin would have been the better move, since there are some really interesting weapon archetypes in there, including Indebted Kindness, which would have been awesome to see a perk refresh for, but in summary, it's clear to see that the Elegant Arsenal is nowhere close to the power and notoriety of the Brave Arsenal, which is quite unfortunate. Furthermore, the larger issue at hand is that Bungie put out a tweet saying that fully enhanced adept weapons from Rite of the Nine, as in double perk adepts which are fully enhanced to level 3, are only going to be equivalent to tier 3 weapons in the new gear tier system coming in Edge of Fate. And if you aren't aware, there are set to be 5 tiers, with tier 5 being the best possible role. So if we're already being told that the weapons from Rite of the Nine are only going to be tier 3 adjacent, so middle of the road essentially, on top of the fact that most of them are already pretty mid, does somewhat kill the motivation to grind for them in the first place. So that's why I'm advocating that Bungie should have just put really strong and wacky perk combos on these guns, since if they're going to be irrelevant in 2 months time anyway, why give them the plain and standard combos which they currently have? In conclusion, the Elegant Arsenal is no Brave Arsenal. It suffers from a poor selection of weapon archetypes that also come with bland and dissatisfying perk combos that leave a lot to be desired. So I hope you like my ideas for what they could have improved in this regard. I hope that if any Bungie employees watching find my feedback valuable and consider taking it into account for the next time an event like this rolls around. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.